This is how we like to welcome our visitors, a nice smiling receptionist, and what we've put up here are some kind of before and afters, so that as soon as you walk into the place, you see that kind of idea of what we're all about. I think what gives us a great deal of satisfaction, myself and all my colleagues in the London Docklands Development Corporation, is the sense of having been given the remit of 8.5 square miles of London, very close to the centre, that was derelict, going nowhere, with no future, and leaving it as a place that has improved considerably, particularly physically, and which now has a future and has hope.
They called it the London Docklands Development Corporation, and in 1981, when it began, it had to build almost from scratch an entire infrastructure, everything needed to create a city within a city. They had an initial annual grant of £70 million, rising to £300 million today. They had the powers to compulsory purchase. They were selected by central government and answerable directly to the Secretary of State for the Environment. Not so much a democratic body, more a commando force for development.
The original conception here in 1981 was of relatively low-height developments. The thought of a Canary Wharf just didn't enter anybody's mind in 1981. So suddenly you've got a change of focus as the economic strength applied in the middle 80s and the new vision for the area developed. Hence the criticisms about transportation into the area, which are quite valid and with the benefit of hindsight, but looked ludicrous when the original map of the area was drawn back in 1981. And you have to decide how much economic strength drives a development.
They're a close-knit community on the Isle of Dogs. They have a choir and a sense of the long history they're descended from. The Port of London may have served Rome, but it brought prosperity to Britain. By the 18th century, the port was enormous. Ships waited days to find a berth. Thieving and smuggling was rife. The solution was docks, walled off from the outside, with bonded warehouses and an army of dockers. By Victorian times, the wealth of the British Empire grew. Most of it poured home through the London docks, but the dock communities remained poor. In the Second World War, the Luftwaffe targeted the East End, but couldn't shatter its spirit. At their height, the London docks handled over 60 million tonnes of cargo a year, and 150,000 people worked in or around the docks. But by the 50s and 60s, the docks had become key to the fight between government and trade unions. Jack Dash led them, often out on strike.
For common sense to take place in the corridors of power, to get negotiations up for resumption of work based upon the men's demand.
The strikes were bitter and in the end futile. The container ship revolution overtook the politics of dispute with a new port further downriver, and by 1979, Docklands lay derelict and abandoned.
Everybody talks about the dockers that lost their jobs, but in effect, for every docker's job that was lost, there was something like 5 to 10 ancillary workers whose jobs went. So it was a real trauma for everybody.
In a sense, it was the greatest gift of history to this city. 5,500 acres, going all the way from the big estuary right to the heart of the city, literally, to Tower Bridge. Filled with these wonderful big docks. London had been the greatest port in the world. And I could see that you could build here a water city rather like Venice, which would be the most amazing living environment, actually, in London.
The docks, you've got to recall, were secret places. No one went to the docks unless they had business there. They were surrounded by high walls. They had their own police force. There was one bus service running in the island in 1981. The roads were awful, and there was no railway, no tube connections. It was a very isolated and pretty poor community. It had many of the benefits that go with those disadvantages. They were very close-knit, loyal, a very strong sense of identity, but they also were pretty hard done by.
What to do with vast areas of water and land had obsessed committee after committee and produced report after report, filled with argument and indecision.
One of the problems that we faced at that time was that the government wouldn't give the Docklands Joint Committee the powers to acquire land off the statutory bodies like the PLA, like British Waterways, like British Rail and places like that.
You've got to realise that you had got here a monument to failure, to 40 years of failure by local authorities and nationalised industries, a disaster scenario from which life had gone. You had a desert, a wasteland.
We were confronted with a mesh of overlapping bureaucracies, the grey men, as I called them in my original speech. We somehow had to find something that would cut through imaginatively and begin selling the idea of enterprise.
I saw these 6,000 acres of derelict land. I said, literally day one, we're going to create urban development corporations, and the 6,000 acres of East London is going to be the first target.
This was all from a 25-minute helicopter ride over Docklands. If that makes you an expert on Docklands, then the seagulls must be the most expert, because they're always flying over Docklands, and they do on Docklands exactly what Hasseltine done to us.